philosophy and science are not two completely different things. It is only in our modern understanding that somehow we have separated philosophy and science to such an extent that philosophy seems like an abstract, just speculative inquiry into the nature of reality, and science is actual, specific, experimental. But this is a wrong notion. It is because science can directly be associated with the development of technology. It helps us to understand things in a tangible way. It is about measurement. It is about specifics. Science is much more visible. But the underlying framework of science is language, and language is the domain of philosophy. Now, if it is all about mathematics and equations and experimental results, then why do we propose a theory? In science, theory is not an abstract idea. It is a very specific way of presenting a problem, addressing it. Without a right philosophical approach and understanding of the problem, just using mathematics, we won't be able to solve problems. Now, that has been one of the main disconnects over the past few decades. Because scientific inquiry has increasingly isolated itself from philosophy, more and more science itself has become abstract by disconnecting from philosophy. The proof is the string theory. String theory emerged mainly to solve the mathematical problem of reconciling quantum mechanics with gravity. Now, there is a classic example of what happens when you leave out the philosophy and purely try to solve a problem as if it is a mathematical problem. There was a time science itself was a branch of what we call natural philosophy. Science is a part of philosophy. When philosophical thinking is applied to subjective experiences, it is more personal. We're talking about mind, we're talking about consciousness, aliveness, experience, memory. When it is applied to the natural world outside, it is science. But philosophy is the foundation. Of course, without scientific inquiry, without mathematics, without experimental verification, we cannot directly use philosophy as an empirical way of proving things. But this doesn't mean philosophy itself is some kind of abstract entity that is not needed in science. The problem of consciousness has been a philosophical problem, not because it is an unsolvable problem or it is just a human problem. It's because that is where you can begin. First, the problem has to be accepted and acknowledged philosophically. Then comes mathematics, then comes experimental proofs. It is because we could not transition, we could not extrapolate consciousness from our philosophical thinking. Even now, this is the only problem. Consciousness is a very important problem. Scientists know this. If truly something has to keep the scientific community up at nights, it has to be consciousness. Because without solving the problem of consciousness, we are not solving the problem of life. We are not understanding the nature of reality as it is. And that is the ultimate purpose of science. The purpose of science is not to create gadgets and technologies. Those are byproducts. The most important purpose of science is to help us understand the nature of reality. Now, how can we truly understand the nature of reality when we leave out what we regard as a subjective experience? Because for us, the whole universe of experience is happening as a subjective experience. I see, I hear, I smell, I touch, I feel, I am. If we leave that out, then we are simply mathematically establishing connections between things, and we are calling that connection truth. It cannot be the truth, because imagine there's another planet where there are other creatures slightly different from us, or even vastly different from us. There is no reason whatsoever for them to use words like gravity, motion, electricity. These are all models. They need not be using this language at all. Then how do we connect with them? If we happen to meet them, or if they happen to meet us, they have a model of how the universe works. We have a model of how the universe works. But both the models don't match. The only scenario where it can match is when both of us have come to an existential understanding of reality. Irrespective of the language we are using, if we both know what life is in reality, in actuality, what consciousness is, then we can communicate, because we are part of the same conscious experience. At least that much we can be certain about. If we find a living organism that is worth interacting with, you can be absolutely certain that it will be conscious. Because we cannot even imagine an organism that can reciprocate, that can interact with us without consciousness. Because we know this in our own world. Individuals who do not reciprocate the way we want them to reciprocate with us, we put them at a level of lower intelligence, to a point where we even say they're not that conscious. We use the term conscious as a substitute for intelligence. They're not that aware of things. They're not aware of what's happening in the world. Their level of consciousness has not developed to the point where they can understand complex problems. Which means consciousness is how we will recognize intelligence. And yet, we don't even know what consciousness is. We have no place for it in physics because we have not been able to quantify it. And if you cannot quantify something in some form, mathematically, experimentally, then we cannot accept it as an objective truth. That is why the problem of consciousness has been a philosophical problem. Not because philosophy loves to speculate on abstract things, it is because it is only a philosophical thought when proven experimentally becomes science. Think about Einstein's general theory of relativity. If you keep the mathematics aside, it's pure philosophy. It's pure imagination. In fact, mathematics comes later. Einstein himself could not solve his field equations fully. It was solved by someone else. But why is he credited for general relativity? Although someone else proved it mathematically. Experimentally, someone else proved it. It's because philosophically, the idea that it is the bending and curving of space-time that is acting on a body, and that is gravity. So gravity is not a force, it's an interaction between the fabric of space-time and a body of mass or energy. Now, if you leave the mathematics aside, this has to first come as a thought. For Einstein, it came when he saw a man falling from the ladder. And he extrapolated it, he imagined it. Well, of course, he did not see a person actually fall, he imagined. He saw someone on the ladder, he just imagined what if he fell. And if there was enough gap between him and the earth, he could just keep on falling and he would not experience gravity. So just the act of falling is removing the influence of gravity on him. So that's where he connected gravity with acceleration. A completely different philosophical thought. Now, what is missing in our scientific inquiry now is this. We have become so attached to our known systems of inquiry that we are stuck trying to solve mathematical equations. That is why once in a while an individual comes who brings a totally new perspective to what's happening. And that perspective comes from a deeper philosophical understanding of what life is, what existence is. To that individual, unless philosophically something makes sense, he won't try and put it as a theory. Right there, your subjectivity is shaping your theory in such a way that it does not cross the boundaries of existential limitation. You can't just keep on imagining problems and solutions without a strong philosophical grounding, because without a strong philosophical grounding, you are not doing science, you're doing something very speculative. And you can't expect existence to fall into your mathematical model. That's a problem with string theory. Although it solves many important problems mathematically, there is no experimental proof whatsoever that one-dimensional strings exist in reality. Hence, it will always remain just a mathematical model. It might be useful in some ways, it might help us in creating some technologies, but when it comes to the real understanding of life, nature, and existence, it fails. And it will be utterly useless in trying to use it as a communication tool between entities that do not understand this model of existence. If we happen to meet another form of life, the last thing you should expect them to know is string theory.